Hi, my name is Peter Andras. I'm a professor at Edinburgh Napier University. This is my lecture series on the evolution of complex systems. This is lecture 9, Economics and Money. This is part 1 of lecture 9. So in this two lectures, we will look at the economy and the role of money in the context of society. First, we will look at exchanging of human artifacts, how this provides a building of the foundation of the economy as a system within the society. Then we look at the role of accounting, and then we move on to the concept of money and the role of the money in the economy from the perspective of systems theory. And then we will discuss the memory and information subsystem within the context of the economy. So, we define society as the system of all human communications. And we define social systems as the subsystems of this society. So previously we looked at the education subsystem, religion and science, and also politics and the legal subsystems. Now, the society is built of many such subsystems, and overall these subsystems contribute to the reproduction and expansion of the society. Now, to reproduce the society, you need to reproduce human communications which reference other human communications and follow the continuation rules of the society and the society defining language. Now, we mentioned that the memories in the human society, in the first instance, are the human memories of what has been said and what has happened. And then we discussed that written memories are a very important expansion of the memories within the human society, where these expand the reliance of human memories, and reading written memories reproduces the communications that for which the record is provided. And we discussed about education and religion and science in particular as the key components of the reproduction subsystem of the human society, which provide the core references to further communications within human society. Now, however, we also mentioned human artifacts, and we said that these can be also seen as memories of human communications, partly which facilitate the reproduction of the communications which lead to the creation of these artifacts, and also which facilitate the reproduction of other human communications related to the use of these artifacts. Now, in the context of human artifacts, it's important to note the importance of the ownership association, that by having a human ownership of an artifact, the artifact becomes a human artifact already. Of course, there are a number of human artifacts which require more human intervention, more human communications to deliver the artifact itself. So, in terms of human artifacts, you can see various objects, writing itself, rituals, and services. So these are all human artifacts which are created through human communications and which provide ways of use by humans and ways of facilitating further human communications within the society. Now, the ownership of these artifacts is regulated by the legal system of the society, which is in turn set by the political system. And ultimately, the ownership relationships reflect the identity of the society. So what can be owned in the society, how that ownership is structured, what layers of the ownership are there, these all reflect how the society is organized, how is the identity of that society. Now, the artifacts represent human communications, which lead to the creation of the artifacts. And as I said, given the affordances of these artifacts, the ways of utilization, they facilitate the utilization of them and the creation of human communications and human behaviors which relate to the utilization of them. So, for example, if you consider a chair, there are ways of human communications which lead to the production of chair, and there are ways of human communications which lead to the usage of the chair. But the same way, in the same way, it applies the same reasoning to services. So, for example, uh, singing a song at a show. Uh, It provides a service which leads to ways of utilization, and these human utilizations of this service, in other words, the listening to the song, provides further ways of generating human communications. For example, between friends who listen to the song and talk about it, or between people who listen to the song and party along it, and so on. Now, if you look at the artifacts, one key feature of them is that they can be exchanged. Now, the exchange of artifacts really relates to the exchange of the ownership attributes related to these artifacts. The simplest economy is the exchange economy, where artifacts are exchanged for other artifacts. So, for example, 3 potatoes for an egg. That is the value of an egg expressed in potatoes, and people exchange these artifacts. Now, these kind of exchange economies are there in primitive worlds where the society is small and mostly produces artifacts which are exchanged, and they're given the size of the society and direct relations between the individuals, this is sufficient. But similar exchange economies have been developed in certain situations, mainly in the context of very high inflations, for example, in Bulgaria in 1996 or in Germany in 1923, where the value of the money practically disappeared. And people would exchange goods. So, for example, getting on a bus in Bulgaria in 1996 might have costed 1 egg, because there was no other way of using of exchanging goods, because the money had no value because of the very high inflation. Now, when the artifacts are exchanged, really what is exchanged is the capacity of these artifacts to generate further human behaviors and human communications. So essentially, by exchanging an artifact or a pair of artifacts, the expectation is that the reproduction and expansion of the utilization behaviors can expand. So, for example, think of making a pot. If that pot is, if the pot maker gives away pots and gets in exchange some other goods or services, by taking the pot, those people who take the pots, they will have usage of that pot. For example, they can cook bigger dinners. Having bigger dinners, better cooking ware, they can feed better their family, their friends, they can have more communications, they may gather more support from their friends, from their family, and overall, having them allows the society to expand more. In the same way, rituals work as well. So, having a rain ritual in the kind of arid drought period, it is useful because people believe that it will bring the rain, and of course, in most cases, the rain will come sooner or later, so they may believe that the ritual helped them. But actually, doing the ritual will help because it will help the cohesion of the community. It will help also the people who attend the ritual to talk about what will they do when the rain comes. They better prepare and so on. So, exchanging artifacts in general leads to more reproduction of human communications, more expansion of the utilization behaviors related to the artifacts that are exchanged. So we define economic communications as the exchange of artifacts. So this is the changes in the ownership associated with the artifacts and the communication of these changes of ownerships or ownership associations. So the economy is seen as the system of such human exchanges of artifacts. And we see these as communications or as representations of human communications. In this way, the economy is a subsystem of the society because it includes some of the communications, but it has its own particular rules, continuation rules, and referencing rules. How we exchange artifacts references what is the valuation of the artifacts in the sense of what is the use of these artifacts. What other artifacts were exchanged which led to these artifacts that are exchanged. In the same way, exchanged artifacts provide further reference, further basis for references in the context of economic communications. It is important to note that these artifacts that we are talking about both include goods and services. And in this way, the economy leads to the reproduction of the society or supports the reproduction of the society because it supports the generation of more communications and more human behaviors, combining many human communications that relate to the artifacts that are exchanged. Now, in the context of the economic system of the society, there are memories of existing goods and exchange goods. So when there are transactions, there are certain stocks of goods that were there before, and there are exchanges of these goods which lead to a change in the stock and also show a change in the flow of these goods. So these are the transactions, economic transactions, which are measured in terms of stocks, which are the existing goods, and the flows of goods, which are the exchanged goods. Now, in the early forms of such memories, for example, human memories, remembering how many ships we had, how many ships we changed. That serves as a memory of these economic communications. Or there are various markings, marking with stones, using of knots, writing pieces of tools or shells or other objects that we can use to memorize the economic transactions, both in terms of the stocks and in terms of the flow. Now, this leads to the process of the counting, which is the systematic way of taking the inventory of existing goods and services using the stock memories, and also the recording of the exchanges using the flow memories. So counting deals with the processing of the information about memories of stocks and memories of flows of artifacts. Now, the question is, what is the value of these artifacts? So what drives the exchange of these artifacts? Because this is what defines how these economic communications take place. Now, the value is driven by the potential, reflecting the expected contribution of the artifacts to the reproduction and expansion of the society. Now, of course, this is a general scale statement, but of course it applies at a small scale as well. As we mentioned in the case of the pot, getting a new, better pot may help communications, more extended communications with friends, with family, and so on. So it can help locally the growth of human communications, but overall, within society, these help the growth and expansion of the society. Clearly, these values are context dependent because the context is the social context. What is the usage of these artifacts? So, for example, beads, glass beads, might be very useful in a particular society where they use it to create decorations. While in the same society, a car might not be useful if they have no roots in that society. In the same way, services also differ. So, particular religious service is highly valuable in a country or in a society where that religion is one of the major or accepted religions, while in a place where that's not the case, yeah, then no members of that religion in that society, that would be not particularly valuable service. So what we said is that each artifact has a context-dependent value, which is a socially defined value, and clearly even within a single society, the context may change and that may impact the valuation of the artifact. So by exchanging artifacts, the society overall aims to improve the reproduction and expansion potential of the society. So clearly it is important here to know that this is the potential and the expectation of what is expected to support the expansion and the reproduction of the society. Now, in general, this value-based exchange is always expected to lead to an increase of the reproduction and expansion ability of the society. However, it is important to note that it doesn't always happen because it is based on an estimate of the value of the artifact, and that value and value estimate may not always turn out to be true. Context may change, or the valuation may be misplaced, for example. So, this leads to the idea that we should be able to measure the value of the artifacts. So, what is the reproduction and expansion facilitating potential of an artifact, be that a good or a service? As I said, the valuation is based on the expectations of the usefulness of this artifact. And the valuation is expressed in terms of exchange. So if I can exchange one sheep for 2 goats, that tells me what is the valuation of the sheep in terms of goats. In the same way, the valuations can be expressed in many ways in terms of many exchanges. And that is how we can measure the value of the artifacts. So the question is, what are the equivalent valuations? What are the equivalent reproduction and expansion potentials of artifacts? This is really which establishes the exact value of these artifacts. As I said, if the sheep is worth 3 goats, but not 4, then the value of the sheep in terms of goats is 3 goats. In the same way, you will find that many other things. So, for example, religious service might be worth of 2 cows and 3 goats, and so on. In general, the equivalent values in the social context determine the equivalent values of artifacts determine the valuations of these artifacts, which drive the changes. Now, exchanges of artifacts actually lead to ways of establishing what kind of things are used, or how these exchanges are used. What kind of things are used mainly for exchanges. And here comes this leads to the idea of the money. So in early societies, shells, stones, animals were used as the kind of medium of exchange. The ways how the exchanges, the value, so the valuations through exchanges were calculated. In general, relatively rare goods are used, and the key feature of these particular goods is that they are exchangeable for any other good or service. This leads to the emergence of these early forms of what we call today money. So the proper form of money comes with the establishment of coins. They are typically made of copper, silver, or gold, which are sufficiently rare metals um, to be used as general tools of valuation. And these rare goods emerge as universal exchange vehicles. It's very important. So these are the exchange vehicles where you can exchange a good, you can express the valuation of the good or service in terms of these universal exchange vehicles. And then you can use that universal exchange vehicle valuation to exchange them for other goods, or directly to exchange them for these exchange vehicles, like the coins or the money in general. And then use the money in the next transaction to exchange it for other goods or services. Now, these facilitate the reproduction and expansion of the exchanges very much, because instead of having an exchange economy where you need to keep in mind all the variations, how many ships or how many goods are exchanged for sheep, how many potatoes are exchanged for onions, and so on. Instead of keeping all these various valuation relations recorded and followed, you can reduce the references to the valuations in terms of these universal exchange vehicles, the money, and that facilitates very much the expansion of exchanges because it makes them simpler, makes simpler the valuations, and makes simpler the execution of the exchanges, and makes much more likely that we avoid miscalculations and misestimations of the valuations of the goods and services. So the earlier coins were effectively copper, silver, gold coins. However, in many early states, the kind of agreed value of coins emerged, where the gold coins is nominally gold, but actually it's made of a mixture of silver and gold, or possibly copper, silver, and gold. And there is an agreed value of the nominal gold coin. Then later, the paper money was introduced in societies, first in China and later elsewhere as well, where the money in itself does not have particular base piece of paper. However, by the political and legal decision of the society, certain pieces of paper are established as valid money with standardized value, which can serve as the standardized universal exchange vehicles. So the social system defines the value of the money through its economic subsystem using the political and legal system, which define the ways of use of money and the value of the money and the ways of producing money and using money within the society. In this way, the money moves away from the simpler forms where rare goods are used as exchange vehicles to the use of certain kinds of standardized rare goods like gold, silver coins as exchange vehicles to the agreed value coins, and then to the agreed value notes or paper money, where the value of this is established within the society, and then they are used through this agreement as money in the society for the economic exchanges. So the economic communications are the exchanges of goods and services, and the money is a key vehicle of economic communications, which is used to signal the value, because all valuations are done using the money. And this is used to set the prices of goods and services and facilitate the exchanges in the economy, the generation of the economic communications. So in this way, the money is a very special good which is used for the facilitation of exchanges and the facilitation of the generation of economic communications. The value of the money is established within the society by agreement. This agreement is mediated through the political and legal system, which establish how the value of this agreed money goods is working, how it is established, what are the rules of use. And after that, this money becomes a special good which is facilitating all the exchanges within the society. Now, as you noted, accounting is developed as a way of systematically managing the information about stocks and flows of goods. And of course, this adapts to the context of the economies where money is used as the main exchange vehicle. So the records of the economic communications exchanges are standardized in terms of the money. So what are both stocks and flows are measured using expression of values in money. And this leads to standardized accounting, which is much easier to follow than previous simpler systems, and again helps the generation of more economic communications, more communications about the memories of these economic communications. So, economic communications are seen as exchanges of goods and services for money. So earlier we said that these are all exchanges of goods and services, but in societies where there is a defined money, which is the medium of exchanges, this kind of universal exchange good, all economic communications are effectively expressed as exchanges of goods and services for money. And the language of the economy is the language of the exchanges with money. In simpler economies, there are many kinds of exchanges, but in modern economies, where the society has an established concept of money and the value of money is established, in these economies, the language of the economy is the language of the exchanges with money, where all artifacts are exchanged for money. And the rules of the economic system are the rules that regulate the money and the money exchanges. Now, these rules are set through the legal system, by the political system, and they reflect the identity of the society. Now, we mentioned already that we keep memories of economic communications through the accounting system, keeping memories of stocks and flows. And in general, we record the money exchanges for goods, services, and record stocks of money. So when you have receipts, bills, and contracts which tell you what kind of exchanges for money will take place or have taken place, these are the memories of economic communications, and processing these generate further memories of economic communications. So another accounting now works in terms of money. We measure both stocks and flows in money. And the money is used to generate this kind of the memories of economic communications, and money represents the memory of the ability to exchange goods. So the stocks of money show what kind of goods are available for exchange for this money. And the flows of money again shows how the ability to exchange is changing. Now, the actions of the economic system are economic communications which have an impact on the environment. So these are communications in terms of exchanges of goods and services, and in particular exchanges of them for money, which have an impact on the environment. So this impact of them on the environment might be the production of goods and services because they are bought and sold by those who produce and those who are using them. But also this will include impacts through the usage of the artifacts. So if I buy a car and use that car will have an impact on the environment, will have an impact on the roads, will have an impact on my life. So these are all actions of the economic system on its both social and wider physical environment. Now, the perceptions of the economy are changes in the environment which lead to changing economic communications. Now, to change these, there must be changes about expectations about the valuations of the goods. So, as society changes, there are changing needs in the society, which impacts the valuation of the goods and services within the society. Certain things become more useful, while other things become less useful. So if you look at jobs, there were many jobs 100 years ago, mainly manual jobs, which disappeared today because there are machines which can deliver those jobs more precisely and with less danger to humans. In the same way, there are a number of jobs which we have today which never existed before. Think about computer operators, designers of AI applications, and others. Things are mobile phones. Mobile phones 100 years ago, there was no idea of them. So the variation of them at that time was zero. Today they are much more valuable. And again, if you look back, let's say 40 years ago, when mobile phones were large and relatively rare, their value was much higher than today for each individual item. So as the society changes, the valuation of goods and services change, and these have an impact on the economy. These changes of valuations are the effect of the impact on the economy, and they represent the perceptions of the economy about the environment of the economy, both social and physical environment. Now, if you look at an expanding society, a growing society, it is necessary to have a growing economy in that society. If the economic expansion is missing, then the society is likely to contract. And if you consider, for example, comparison of communist and capitalist economies, in communist economies, a lot of planning was done. However, the planning was never exactly precise, which meant that some goods were produced too much, others were produced too little, and overall the economic expansion halted, and actually these economies were shrinking over the years. Compare these to capitalist economies where the growth carries on, although not always. There are periods of shrinking, periods when the economy is not growing and where the value of companies is shrinking, and these periods happen and they are followed by other periods of growth in a cyclical way. However, overall, over a long time, the shrinking periods are shorter and smaller than the growth periods overall. And overall, the economy is expanding in most capitalist societies. This leads to the concept of inflation. Now, if the value of the money changes rapidly and the amount of changes are unpredictable, we have an inflationary situation where the money amount of money in the society is growing too fast, where the growth of the economy is not catching up with the growth of the money. So, for example, in a country where they print money, think about Germany in the 1920s, or Brazil in the late 80s and 90s, or Bulgaria in 1996, where the value of the money disappears very quickly because of these unpredictable changes. Now, given that the money, we can see it as a kind of memory of the economy, it impacts on the value of the economy, and when the value of the money shrinks and disappears, that leads to shrinking of the economy as well. So you get inflation when you have an economy with very fast growing money supply, possibly shrinking economy combined with a growing money supply, where there is a readjustment of the value of the money very rapidly, and this leads to the inflation, where the growth of the money happens fast and the growth is unpredictable. Now, this unpredictability increases the ambiguity in the economic communication in the exchanges, because you don't know what is the value, because the value is changing so fast that the economic exchanges get reduced. That leads to further shrinking of the economy. So this happened in a number of countries, as I noted. So to summarize, we discussed about human artifacts. We noted that the ownership relations are very important in relation with these human artifacts, be them goods or services, and these are regulated through the legal system of the human society, in turn representing decisions of the political system and reflecting the identity of this particular society. You noted that there are exchanges of human artifacts which are driven by the valuations of these artifacts, where standardized exchanges are used to define the standard values of the artifacts. And he said that the economy is the system of such exchange communications, which represent the exchange of ownership relations. We discussed about accounting, and we said this is dealing with the memories of economic communications, where it gives stocks and flows of exchanges of artifacts. And then we discussed about money, which is a standardized universal exchange good that is used to exchange any artifacts for this particular good, and it facilitates the very significant and rapid growth of artifact exchanges within the human society. You noted that in earlier societies, particular kinds of rare goods were used in the function of the money, but then as societies developed, they introduced coins, meta coins, and then agreed values for particular forms of money, in particular paper money in more recent societies, which have an agreed value, but has this particular important feature that it can be exchanged for any goods and any services, and it is used to measure the value of goods and services. Accounting is done in terms of money, and economy is really expressed in terms of exchanges of goods and services for money. And the rules of the economy are expressed in terms of the rules of creation of money, defining the value of the money, and the use of money for exchanges. Now, let's see a few questions and answers. First, can we see the performance of religious ritual as a human artifact? And the answer is yes. Religious rituals are services, and they are generated through a number of human communications, and indeed they can be seen as human artifacts. Next, is it true that a piece of land is a human artifact? And the answer to this is that the piece of land becomes a human artifact when there is a human claim of ownership on the land. If there is no claim of ownership on the land, or no claim of lack of ownership, then that land is not a human artifact. However, in practice, all land that we deal with have some ownership relation related to it, which turns it into a human artifact. Some land can be publicly owned by a state or by an organization or by a community, but still there is an ownership relationship which turns it into a human artifact in that sense. Next question. Can we consider the writing of a poem as a form of accounting? And well, the writing of a poem is the creation of an artifact, but it is not measuring of the value of this artifact and not measuring stock or flow of this artifact. So it is not a form of accounting. Next, is it true that the value of a service or good is given by its expected ability to facilitate reproduction and expansion of the society? And well, that's how we define the value of the services and goods. It's really the expected ability to facilitate reproduction and expansion in the society. That's what defines how valuable is that service or good within the society. Next question, is it true that the marginal exchange value of a good provides the value of that good? And indeed, that's the case. One additional item of that good, what is the equivalent value in terms of other goods? That marginal exchange value is really what defines the value of these goods. Because if you have none of those goods, you may overvalue them, but when you get to the marginal exchange value, that's where you get the actual valuation of the good in the context of valuation system that you use. Finally, can we use pints of water to measure the marginal exchange value of a horse? What about using small pieces of silver? And the answer to both questions is yes. You can use any other good to measure the marginal exchange value of a horse. And of course, depending on what good you use, be that pints of water or pieces of silver, on that depends how much is the valuation of the horse. And of course, it depends on the social context, how pints of water and pieces of silver are valued in that particular social context. Thank you.